10 minutes before I walked down the aisle, I found my fiancé's burner phone hidden inside the church. It was still warm. And the message on the screen said, "She has no idea. After today, nothing changes." My hands started shaking. The organ music was already playing. 200 guests were waiting. My dress cost more than my first car. And in that moment, holding that stranger's phone that belonged to the man I was about to marry, I realized I had a choice to make. Walk down that aisle and pretend I never saw it, or stop everything right there and face a truth I wasn't ready for. I chose the truth. And what happened next, no one in that church will ever forget. My name is Rebecca, and this is the story of how I became the bride who walked into a church full of people and walked out alone, carrying nothing but a burner phone and the shattered pieces of a future I thought I knew. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I met David 3 years ago at a community fundraiser in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was 34, recently out of a relationship that had fizzled rather than exploded, and honestly, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was there because my sister volunteered with the organization, and she'd guilt me into helping set up tables. David was there because he'd donated a significant amount of money and wanted to see where it was going. That's what he told me, anyway. He was 41, tall, with the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that night, long after the event ended, sitting on the tailgate of his truck in the parking lot, watching the stars come out over the city. He told me about his work as a financial consultant, his love for hiking, his golden retriever named Biscuit. Everything felt easy with him. Natural. Like we'd known each other in another life and were just picking up where we'd left off. The first year was beautiful in that quiet, steady way that makes you believe in forever. David wasn't flashy or dramatic. He didn't shower me with expensive gifts or grand gestures. Instead, he remembered that I liked my coffee with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon. He'd leave little notes in my lunch bag when I had a big presentation at work. He'd drive 40 minutes out of his way just to pick me up when my car was in the shop. My friends adored him. My parents, who'd been skeptical of every man I'd dated since college, actually asked when we were getting married before he'd even proposed. When he finally did propose, 18 months into our relationship, it was perfect. Not perfect in a movie way, but perfect for us. We were hiking up to Crowder's Mountain, a trail we'd done together a dozen times, and when we reached the top, he got down on one knee and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes before he even finished the question. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. Everything about David felt right. The wedding planning process was surprisingly smooth. We decided on a small ceremony, just close family and friends, at a historic chapel on the outskirts of Charlotte. David handled most of the logistics, which I was grateful for since my job as a high school counselor kept me busy, especially during the spring semester. He seemed excited about it, involved in every decision from the flowers to the music. His only request was that we keep the guest list tight, people who really mattered to us. I agreed completely. Neither of us wanted a big, showy affair. We wanted something meaningful, intimate, a celebration of the life we were building together. Looking back now, I wonder if his insistence on a small wedding was really about intimacy, or if it was about control. About limiting the number of witnesses to whatever he was planning. The week before the wedding, I noticed small things that didn't quite add up, but I brushed them off. David had always been protective of his phone, but that week, he became almost paranoid about it. He'd take it with him to the bathroom. He'd flip it face down the second I walked into a room. When I asked him about it, he laughed and said he was coordinating a surprise for me, something special for our honeymoon. I wanted to believe him. I chose to believe him. Because the alternative, that something was wrong, that the man I was about to marry was hiding something from me, was too painful to consider. I told myself I was being paranoid, that wedding stress was getting to me, that everything would be fine once we got through the ceremony and could finally relax. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear blue skies and unseasonably warm weather for October. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids, my sister and 2 of my closest friends from college. We had breakfast together, mimosas and pastries, laughing about old memories and making toasts to the future. I felt calm. Happy. Ready. David had stayed at his best friend's place the night before, keeping with tradition, and we'd agreed to meet at the church. He texted me that morning, just a simple message that said, "Can't wait to see you at the end of that aisle. I love you." I read it 3 times, smiling like an idiot, feeling grateful for this man who'd chosen me, who'd made me believe in love again after I'd almost given up on it. I had no idea that in a few hours, everything I thought I knew about him would come crashing down. We arrived at the church 2 hours before the ceremony. The florist was already there, arranging white roses and eucalyptus along the pews. The photographer was setting up equipment. Everything looked exactly how I'd imagined it. I went to the bridal room, a small space at the back of the church with a full-length mirror and a couch, to start getting ready. My sister helped me into my dress, a simple A-line gown with lace sleeves that had belonged to our grandmother. As she buttoned up the back, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. This was really happening. I was getting married. I was starting a new chapter. I was going to be someone's wife. The thought filled me with a joy so profound it almost hurt. If only I'd known that in less than an hour, that joy would turn to something else entirely. With about 40 minutes until the ceremony, I needed a moment alone. I sent my bridesmaids to check on the flowers and make sure David's family had arrived. I wanted just 5 minutes to myself, to breathe, to let the reality of it all sink in. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in my grandmother's dress, and I felt her presence so strongly it was like she was in the room with me. She'd been married to my grandfather for 53 years before he passed. She always said the secret to a long marriage was honesty, even when the truth was hard. Even when it hurt. I wish I'd thought more about those words in that moment. I wish I'd known how soon I'd need them. I decided to walk around the church, just to settle my nerves. The ceremony wasn't in the main chapel but in a smaller, more intimate space connected to it by a covered walkway. As I walked through the vestibule, my heel caught on an uneven floorboard and I stumbled, catching myself on the wall. That's when I noticed it. One of the floorboards was loose, sticking up slightly higher than the others. And wedged beneath it, partially hidden, was a phone. Not just any phone. A cheap, generic smartphone, the kind you buy at a convenience store. No case. No identifying stickers or marks. Just a plain black phone that didn't belong to anyone I knew. My first thought was that someone had dropped it, maybe during a previous event at the church. I picked it up, intending to turn it in to the church office. But the moment I touched it, the screen lit up. And that's when I saw the message. She has no idea. After today, nothing changes. We'll figure it out like we always do. The message was from a contact saved only as M. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I knew I shouldn't look further. I knew that reading someone else's messages was a violation of privacy. But something in my gut told me this phone was connected to my wedding, to my life, to David. With shaking hands, I unlocked it. There was no password, no security at all. And what I found inside made the entire room start spinning. Dozens of messages between the phone's owner and M, going back months. Messages that were intimate, familiar, planning meetups and discussing times when she would be at work or busy. And then I saw another thread. This one was with someone saved as J, different woman, same pattern. Same secretive tone. Same promises of soon and just a little longer. I scrolled up in the messages with M, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. And then I found it. A message from 3 weeks ago. The wedding is October 14th. After that, we'll have to be more careful, but nothing really changes. She's not the type to go through my stuff anyway. October 14th. Today. My wedding day. This was David's phone. This was my fiancé's burner phone, the one he'd been so protective of all week, the one he'd hidden in the church because he knew I'd never look there. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The air went out of my lungs. I sat down hard on the wooden bench against the wall, still clutching the phone, trying to process what I was reading. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. But as I kept reading, seeing the planning, the coordination, the careful scheduling of his lies, I knew it was true. The man I was supposed to marry in 30 minutes was living a double life. Maybe a triple life. And I had been so trusting, so secure in our relationship, that I'd never even questioned it. If you've ever ignored a red flag because you loved someone, stay with me. This part matters. Because what came next changed everything. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been 2 minutes or 20. All I knew was that the organ music had started, which meant guests were being seated. In a few minutes, my bridesmaids would come looking for me. My father would be waiting to walk me down the aisle. David would be standing at the altar, probably checking his watch, maybe wondering where his burner phone had gone. And I had a decision to make. The old Rebecca, the one who avoided conflict, who smoothed things over, who made herself small to keep the peace, that Rebecca would have hidden the phone, walked down that aisle, and confronted David privately later. She would have protected his reputation, protected her own embarrassment, and dealt with this quietly, behind closed doors. But something had shifted in me when I read those messages. Something fundamental had broken and reformed into something harder, clearer. I realized that if I walked down that aisle now, knowing what I knew, I would be choosing a lie. I would be starting a marriage based on deception. And I would be telling David, and myself, that his betrayal was something I was willing to overlook for the sake of appearances. I stood up, smoothed down my dress, and tucked the phone into the small pocket hidden in the folds of fabric. My grandmother had insisted all her dresses have pockets because, in her words, a woman should always have a place to keep her secrets and her courage. I'd thought it was a charming quirk when my sister told me about it. Now it felt like a gift. I walked back to the bridal room, where my sister was waiting, looking slightly panicked. "There you are. We've got 10 minutes. Are you ready?" She looked at my face and her smile faded. "Beck? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath and said something I never thought I'd say on my wedding day. "I need you to go get David. Tell him to meet me in the vestibule right now. Don't tell him why. Just get him here." My sister's eyes went wide. "Now? But the ceremony is about to start. What's going on?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the exact moment she understood that something was very, very wrong. "Just trust me. Please. Get him here now." 5 minutes later, David appeared in the vestibule, looking confused and slightly annoyed. He was in his tux, his boutonniere perfectly placed, his hair styled exactly how he liked it. He looked like the man I'd fallen in love with. He looked like someone I could trust. But I knew better now. "Rebecca, what's going on? We're supposed to be starting in 5 minutes. Is everything okay?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. I watched his face change, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his eyes go from confused to terrified in the span of a heartbeat. "I found your phone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "The one you've been hiding. The one you've been using to coordinate with M and J. The one where you told someone that after today, after our wedding, nothing would really change." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in 3 years, David was speechless. "Who are they?" I asked. "Who are M and J? How long has this been going on? And did you really think you could marry me while keeping them in your life?" He reached for the phone, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "Don't try to take it. Don't try to explain. Don't try to tell me it's not what it looks like, because I read the messages, David. All of them. I know exactly what this is." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now it just looked like what it was, a man trying to buy time to construct a lie. "Rebecca, please. Let's talk about this after the ceremony. We have 200 people waiting out there. Your family, my family, everyone we care about. We can fix this later. Just don't do this here. We need to get through the wedding." I stared at him, genuinely shocked by his audacity. "Get through the wedding? Are you serious right now? You want me to marry you, knowing what I know, just to save face in front of our families?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that soft, persuasive tone he used when he wanted something. "Beck, I love you. Whatever you think is going on, whatever you think you found, it's not what you think. Those messages are out of context. I can explain everything. But not here, not now, not 10 minutes before our wedding. If your heart is racing right now, comment, 'I'm still watching.' Because the choice I made next is one I'll never regret." I felt something inside me go very cold and very clear. This was who he really was. Not the man who remembered my coffee order. Not the man who left sweet notes in my lunch. This was a man who, even when caught red-handed with evidence of his betrayal, was still trying to manipulate me into going through with the wedding. Still trying to control the narrative. Still putting his own comfort above my right to the truth. No, I said simply. We're not getting married today. We're not getting married ever. This is over. His face changed again, this time to anger. You're going to throw away 3 years over some text messages you didn't even understand? You're going to humiliate both of us in front of everyone we know because you're feeling insecure? That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Because a man who loved me, really loved me, wouldn't be worried about humiliation right now. He'd be devastated that he'd hurt me. He'd be apologizing, explaining, doing anything to fix what he'd broken. Instead, he was angry that I was disrupting his plan. I need to tell everyone, I said. I can't just leave them sitting there wondering what happened. They deserve to know the wedding is cancelled. David's eyes went wide. You're going to tell them why? You're going to air our private business in front of everyone? I shook my head. I'm going to tell them the wedding is off. What you tell people after that is your business. But I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine when it's not. Before he could respond, I walked past him and headed toward the chapel. I could hear him calling my name behind me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, if I let him talk to me for even one more minute, I was afraid I might lose my nerve. I walked through the doors of the chapel, and every head turned to look at me. My father was standing at the back, waiting to walk me down the aisle. The organist paused mid-song. The final note hung in the air too long, like no one knew how to let it die. 200 faces stared at me, smiling, expectant, ready for a wedding. I walked to the front of the church, not down the aisle between the pews, but along the side wall, until I was standing in front of everyone. I'm sorry, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. The wedding is cancelled. I apologize for any inconvenience, but David and I will not be getting married today. The chapel erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. I saw David's mother stand up, looking between me and her son with confusion and horror. I saw my sister pushing through the crowd toward me. But I didn't wait for questions or explanations. I turned and walked out of the chapel, through the vestibule, and out the front doors of the church into the bright October afternoon. I kept walking until I reached my sister's car in the parking lot, where I finally let myself break down. My sister found me there 10 minutes later, still in my grandmother's dress, crying so hard I could barely breathe. She didn't ask questions. She just held me. The aftermath was messy in ways I hadn't anticipated. My parents were devastated, not because they blamed me, but because they'd loved David, trusted him, welcomed him into our family. They felt betrayed too. David's parents tried to call me, tried to get me to reconsider, suggesting that whatever had happened could be worked through with counseling and time. I never returned their calls. David himself sent dozens of texts over the next few days, alternating between apologies and accusations. He claimed I'd misunderstood the messages, that M and J were just friends he'd been confiding in about wedding stress. He said I'd ruined both our lives over nothing. When I finally blocked his number, the messages started coming from unknown numbers. It took 3 weeks and a lawyer's letter before he finally stopped. But the hardest part wasn't dealing with David or the cancelled wedding or even returning all the gifts. The hardest part was dealing with my own doubts. Late at night, alone in my apartment, I'd wonder if I'd overreacted. If I should have given him a chance to explain. If I'd thrown away a good relationship over some text messages that maybe, possibly, could have had an innocent explanation. Those doubts would creep in during my weakest moments, when I was lonely or scared or missing the future I'd thought I was going to have. But then I'd remember the look on his face when I confronted him. Not heartbreak. Not devastation. Anger. Annoyance that I'd disrupted his plan. And I'd remember that a man who truly loved me wouldn't have burner phones and secret messages and women he was promising that nothing would change after our wedding. A man who truly loved me would have fought for me in that vestibule, not fought to preserve the appearance of a relationship. 6 months after the cancelled wedding, I finally got closure in a way I never expected. I was at a coffee shop near my school, grading papers during my lunch break, when a woman approached my table. She was about my age, pretty, with nervous eyes. "Are you Rebecca?" she asked. I looked up, confused. "Yes. Do I know you?" She sat down without being invited, and I saw her hands were shaking. "My name is Monica. I'm the M from the messages. From David's phone." My heart started pounding. This was one of the women he'd been messaging. one of the women he'd promised that nothing would change. I don't know if you want to hear this, she continued, but I felt like you deserved to know the truth. David and I were together for 4 years. He told me he was divorced, that he lived alone, that he traveled for work. I had no idea about you until after your wedding was supposed to happen. His best friend finally told me the truth, told me about the wedding, about you. I confronted David and he admitted everything. He'd been dating both of us the entire time, keeping us separate, telling us both different stories. I sat there, stunned, as Monica kept talking. She told me about the elaborate lies David had constructed, the fake business trips that were actually weekends with me, the work emergencies, that were dates with her. She told me about Jay, whose real name was Jennifer, who lived in Atlanta and thought David was a consultant who traveled frequently between Charlotte and Atlanta for work. He'd been juggling all 3 of us for years, using burner phones and careful scheduling and an extraordinary attention to detail. Monica had broken up with him the moment she found out, and Jennifer had done the same. Both of them had wanted to contact me, to warn me, but they hadn't known how to find me. When Monica finished talking, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I never would have been with him if I'd known about you. I'm not that kind of person. And I wanted you to know that you did the right thing. Calling off that wedding saved you from years of lies. You were braver than both Jennifer and me. You walked away the moment you knew the truth." After Monica left, I sat in that coffee shop for a long time, processing everything she'd told me. And I realized that my doubts, my late-night questions about whether I'd overreacted, they were gone. Because now I knew for certain that my instinct had been right. The man I'd almost married was not who he pretended to be. The life I'd thought we were building had been a fantasy, carefully constructed and maintained through deception. If I'd walked down that aisle, if I'd ignored what I'd found and chosen to believe his lies, I would have spent years in that same painful confusion, wondering why things didn't add up, why he was always so secretive, why I never felt quite secure. I would have wasted my life on a man who saw me not as a partner but as a piece in whatever game he was playing. Now, 2 years later, I can say with certainty that canceling my wedding was the best decision I ever made. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, deeply and for a long time. But because it taught me that I have the strength to choose truth over comfort, to value myself enough to walk away from a beautiful lie, and to trust my instincts even when everyone around me is telling me I'm making a mistake. I'm not married. I'm not even dating anyone seriously. But I'm happy. I'm whole. I'm me, uncompromised and unbroken by a man who tried to make me smaller so he could keep his secrets. And every single day, I'm grateful to the version of myself who found that phone, read those messages, and chose not to look away. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want to ask you something. Be honest. Would you have walked down that aisle, or walked away? Comment, aisle, or away. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about truth and trust and the courage it takes to choose yourself, please subscribe to our channel. We share real stories from real people, stories about the moments that change us, the decisions that define us, and the strength we find when we're forced to choose between what's easy and what's right. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you always deserve the truth, even when the truth means walking away from everything you thought you wanted.